Whatley for years. For years, you and I have traveled the country, and we have worked with carriers and contractors, both, which come to us with a simple question. I need to remove a tile shower. What line items do I use?
Yeah.
Why, when I use that collection of line items, it never seems to come out to a fair and reasonable price for performing that activity in the field? Like, how can I invoice for removal of tile showers fairly? Boom, December 2021. This is where the priceless update summary video series comes in handy. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Price List Update Summary Video Series by Actionable Insights. You've got Harrison here, and you've got Whatley there, and it is December of 2021. There are approximately 19 new line items that came out to the Xactimate price list this month. Our goal in this video series is always to explore what new line items were added to the Xactimate price list, what existing line items had changes, and how can we give you purpose and context to those new line items and those changes. Essentially, what line items exist and how do I use them? Wally, this is an exciting one. We've had lots of requests over the years around the line items that came out this month. So I'm very excited to report.
You're always excited. You always say you're excited. But for all you guys who have started to disregard his excitement because he is excitable, this is the biggest price list update of 2021. December is where it's at.
So without further ado, we don't need to plug anything. Let's just jump right into the new line items and check it out here. Whatley, for years, you and I have traveled the country, and we have worked with carriers and contractors, both, which come to us with a simple question. I need to remove a tile shower. What line items do I use?
Yeah.
Why, when I use that collection of line items, it never seems to come out to a fair and reasonable price for performing that activity in the field? Like, how can I invoice for removal of tile showers fairly? Boom, December 2021. This is where the priceless update summary video series comes in handy. There are 8 new line items around removing non-salvageable tile. Now, in the past, we've had remove tile floor. Those are line items that have existed, but we never had something that specifically was in the WTR water category code related to tile walls, shower walls. So to start here, we've got WTR TIL. Then you've got every version on the theme of tearing out a non-salvageable tile and bag for disposal. Tear out tile and bag after hours. Tear out tile, no bagging. Tear out tile, no bagging after hours. Tear out tile, cat 3. Tear out tile, cat 3 after. Tear out tile, cat 3, no bagging. Tear out cat 3, no bagging after hours. There it is. There's all the iterations on the theme. This is an exciting one. First thoughts, first reactions. What do you think about these new line items regarding to removing tile walls in the WTR category code?
This is a fantastic addition, especially for those that are operating within the TPA managed repair channel. It was always tough to figure out as a claims manager or as a contractor to figure out how to bill for this formally. And I really like the add-on line items that I'm excited to get into. When you say there's 8 new line items for removing non-salvageable tile, there's really maybe 14 total new line items here. So this really helps, and it's always messy for contractors when they submit a WTR, like a mitigation sheet, and they start using TIL, other categories. That's not really favorable, and it's especially true if you're on the repair side and you add WTR line items. That doesn't go over well. So now we can just keep things within the confines of mitigation straight up. Okay, we're removing this non-salvageable tile, which happens, and then here is exactly how one would do it. Jump down here to this TIL AV. For perspective, this is kind of what we were left with. You would do your ceramic tile, and then you'd remove that, by square foot. And you see that coming in at $229 a square foot. Jumping back up to the core line item in this range, the WTR TIL, they're at $328. So another buck.
Please note, by the way, quickly, this is the San Diego price list.
Yep, San Diego price list. But you're another buck an hour, which is good. I will say it'll probably be less in other regions because CLN-R in California, because of it's such a highly regulated. Yeah, the labor trade code is like it's much higher than maybe it is in Chicago. So Just keep that in mind. It'll be a less significant delta, but a little bit more favorable here, and that's exacerbated with our price list that we're running right now. So anyhow, that seems to work. Check out the demolish removal bathroom. So there's 2 line items really in that range. You can have demolish, removal, bathroom up to 50 square foot, and then you have one that's over 50 square foot to try to realize some economies of scale that would exist when you're doing demo.
And for those that may be unfamiliar with this line item, you can have a line item that you're saying, I'm going to use this to demolish everything in the bathroom. This includes removing finished carpentry, rough plumbing, shower surround, countertops, cabinets, windows, floor cover, drywall, ductwork, everything.
Yep.
So this is an all-inclusive, easy line item to use. But what you and I have found an experience of mastering Xactimate and estimating accurately, transparently, and fairly, it really comes down to finding the individual line items when all added together makes sense.
And the reason this demolish removal really didn't work is it's done by, like, the default calculation is F. It's meant to be applied to the floor. So if you look at, say, a shower surround and it's 4 feet by 4 feet, well, that's 16 feet isn't going to do much for you. You're going to get $330, and no one wants to do that for $334. So that's a bit problematic. Now, that line item, I'm not saying it's incorrect. It's relatively accurate if you look at it relative to the entire square footage of a bathroom, because there's portions of that bathroom that are easy to demo, the drywall and vanities and so on. Like, that stuff is easy. But if you guys have ever demoed a shower surround with a mortar bed, I don't know if there's anything harder, more dangerous. You're like up against silica exposure. I can remember so many times taking a sledgehammer, hitting the tile, having the tile pieces splash back into my neck or whatever else wasn't covered by my PPEs, of course. It was really hectic, really hard work, and you're dealing with the mortar bed, and it's got, I'm having flashbacks, Harrison, the chicken wire behind there. It could just take you a day to get that out of there. And so that's why this never really worked before. And then the pricing department has worked hard. This was a difficult thing for them to adopt, right? I think there was a lot of surveying that went down, a lot of line items, and then their thoughtfulness, the depth of thought is really evident in the add-on line items. Can we jump down there?
Yeah. So summary here quickly. There are new line items in the WTR category code for removing tile walls. Now, building on that, while we've talked and hinted at the other 5 line items that came out in December. So these are all brand new this month. And I love, by the way, that you tied in program work, because I think this is really one of those concepts where the idea of Xactimate is that you can tweak any line item. You can use any line item in any estimate, and you should be able to use it, tweak it, justify it, etc. But as we have found more and more work in this industry, where the first notice of loss goes to the carrier, that claim gets assigned to a TPA. And then when you work for a TPA and program work, you follow specific guidelines on what you can and cannot do when it comes to invoicing. So to have these line items in the WTR category code really brings out the possibility to use Xactimate, whether it's program work or not, and try to come to a reasonable cost for that activity. So there's 5 additional add for line items. We've talked about add for line items. These are line items that are supposed to be used in conjunction with another line item. So if you are tearing out non-salvageable tile and bagging for disposal, but you also need to tear out the mortar bed for the tile, here is your add for line item, WTR category, B mud, with a square footage unit of floor here, for example. And
the distinction being, if the tile is laid on, say, green board or even Wonder board, aka cement board, it's not that much harder to remove that as one core component. But as I mentioned, if it's a true mortar bed, oh my goodness, it is so complicated to get that out of there. And so now there's an add for line item. I would advise you guys, if you're going to use this line item as restoration contractors, do include some forensic photography, maybe a deep link from your Matterport scan, and show that mortar bed or any imagery to actually highlight the fact that it was a mortar bed installation. That's a tough add for line item to approve on the carrier side of the house without some forensic photography support.
Very fair. Note, as an add for line item, this is a labor only component. You may see some others that are labor with some bags every now and then, but mostly these add for line items are labor only related to contemplate the additional labor required to do these add for activities. What other 4 examples do we have for add for line items? We've got Add on to tear out floor drain here, metal or plastic for a tub or shower. Add on to tear out tile concrete shower curb per linear foot. To tear out tile framed shower curb per linear foot. And to tear out shower drain for use with waterproof membrane. Now, please note these come in different units, square foot each, linear foot. So when you use these Ad4 line items, make sure you're using it in conjunction with a tile removal line item. And in fact, if you go look at the additional item information for any of these Ad4s, it will always say this item is intended to be used in conjunction with WTR tile removal line items if needed or applicable. So you have 8 new line items about tearing out non-salvageable tile on walls, tile on ceilings. You've got 5 new Ad4 line items for working with mortar beds, floor drains, shower curbs, and shower drains. I mean, this is something that I think we as an industry have struggled with, of fair invoicing in the mitigation for removal of showers and whatnot. And these collection of 13 new line items gives us a huge dent of value in driving positive change in this industry, having these line items in the price list now.
Yeah, and it should be said, these are mutually exclusive line items. So you wouldn't want to use the add-on tear out floor drain tub shower with the waterproof membrane one. You're going to have to pick one. And then same goes for the tile frame shower curb. It's not as if like there's a concrete base and then you're billing for the one that is framed. So you're going to have to pick one that most closely reconciles with the loss at hand.
Makes sense. The other thing I wanted to compare to, some of these line items did exist in other category codes. For example, the mortar bed for tile did exist in the TIL category code. And if you look at the minus remove activity code for the TIL line item and the WTR line item, you'll see a slight difference in the unit price here. We had some feedback immediately within the first 24 hours of this price list coming out from one of our network, one of our insiders in Chicago that was pointing out that, hey, my TIL BMUD is higher than my WTR BMUD. And we can essentially just chalk that up to Chicago. You've got expensive tile workers and less expensive.
It's actually general labor, LBR.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. You've got more expensive there. We've got higher cleaning and remediation technicians labor rates here in California, which is why this WTR line item that has a CLN-R labor trade code is a little bit higher here than our tile related line item.
But the yields are the same. So it's just a difference in the trade code cost structure from one price list to another.
So thank you for rounding that out. Super exciting, right? I'm very, thank you for pointing it out. Now
He's
I'm
excited.
Catching myself how excited I'm getting all the time. But I gotta say,
well, you got to make up for me, right? Like sometimes I'm like, well, there's
fair.
a new one,
That's
right?
That's fair.
I'm pumped up today, man. I got it.
That's good. All right.
Okay.
2 new line items around repairing insulation flood cuts up to 4 feet. So historically, we've had repair insulation by linear foot up to 2 feet flood cuts. Now we have 2 line items around up to 4 feet. This makes all the sense in the world. Flood cuts are generally made in either up to 2 feet or up to 4 feet. And so to have both drywall and insulation related line items in the 2 foot and 4 foot opportunities by linear foot, this is great, logical, sensible addition. And we'll see some changes, some beneficial changes to the existing up to 2 foot line items in the next section. Lastly, cable ramps and 100 plus amps. So there's been some confusion over the years that we fielded some questions around these power distribution boxes. We've had before you had the greater than signs, remember these are new line items, you had TMP Gen PB and it said power distribution box. But we know Garrett, GMS, we know there's lots of different options out there for power distribution boxes. So I thought this was interesting that they've added 2 new line items and clarified the 2 existing line items. So specifically, first and foremost, generator temporary power cable ramps. For those of you that are not sure what a power cable ramp is, this is the things that you use on site to string your cords through them to protect them so that people can walk on them, etc. So nice to have these when you're working on large losses, you need power, you're setting everything up. Now we have the opportunity to use the power cable ramps and invoice for them, as they are not a tool of the trade and would be something that is specific to that job to be able to function on that job site to have.
Right. And those are going to run lockstep with your Hubble cords and would be more prevalent if you're running like a larger diesel generator. These cable ramps is not something that I would want to pay for as a carrier on every single claim because we deployed a DHU. Typically just taping down our extension cords for that context is going to be sufficient. But if we're running thicker cables, say 4 gauge, that can create a trip hazard that's significant, that's when these would be warranted.
That makes a lot of sense. Then we have power distribution boxes. Help me understand the need for these new line items around the 100 plus amp boxes.
Yeah, so you mentioned, Garrett, over at GMS, and you mentioned there's a lot of different options, but I'm not sure that there are. Like, Garrett came from this space. This is like, he's like the FUBU of restoration for us, by us. And so he created these because you'd end up drying out homes. And, I can remember so many times we just didn't have enough power. And it was so frustrating because you're blowing breakers, trying to set up all your DUs and air movers. And so to solve for that, this allows us to tap into like the 240 line from the oven or from the dryer, right? And so I can start pulling some more power. But the cost structure associated with the procurement of the GMS products is not altogether that similar to what a traditional spider box would be with a Hubble cord, which would be more expensive. And so what they've done here is this line item for power distribution box, 100 amp, that's for a more traditional spider box. Just show that yellow one. This yellow one is like the set standard. This is the one most everybody still uses to this day. So this is an option, and we see this on our large cat losses and so on. But for the day-to-day residential losses, there is now the line item that I think reconciles with the GMS equipment more acutely. So yes, the power distribution box per day. So you'll want to note that one would be sub 100 amps. And so most of these I think are running at like 30, 60 amps, Garrett's equipment. So I think that reconciles with GMS, and then these reconcile with the more traditional spider boxes that you would augment with a Hubble cord often.
I like it. All right. That is 19 new line items added to the Xactimate price list in December of 2021. All of them, I think, will be used immediately in claim settlement. Honestly, sometimes we see line items come out that are like, I don't know if these will have a big impact. All 19 of these line items that are new will seem to have an impact immediately this month and beyond. Yeah.
That 4-foot insulation, like that's going to be used thousands of times a day. So yeah, that's a great addition. And the list goes on. But also huge changes on just the existing line items, which you're going to get into in just a moment. Sometimes I think this is when half of you guys like tune out, but don't do that this month because if you've ever, used a painting line item, then the next section might be particularly interesting to you. What do we got, Harrison?
Let's take a look at yield adjustments. Yield is productivity. If you've ever joined Actionable Insights for one of our training classes around Xactimate, join it. First of all, if you haven't, public or private training, fly us out. But we talk a lot about yield being the productivity of a line item, yield being the amount of a material that you get out of a particular line item per unit. So I want to take a look at the 3 major yield changes. On the left side, if you'll note, we have the November 21 price list for San Diego. On the right side, we have December. So we'll go look at what happened in November, or what existed in November, and what's changed in December. First and foremost, I see a price change in the unit price from $1.97 in November to $2.26 over here in December. That's pretty significant. That's like a 10% increase in price. So this is where we need to go in and actually take a look at the numbers of what changed. There was a very, 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 very slight change in the labor price per hour for installation labor, which you can see reflected in a 91 versus 93 cents per unit. But the actual big one here that was fun to look at for us was the material component.
That's what really changed. I mean, the labor just tracked whatever the trade code was, as would be customary. It changes a little every month. But the material is what changed as it relates to this particular line item.
So a reminder what line items we're talking about here. These are the insulation repair by linear feet up to 2 feet, right? So we're repairing insulation flood cuts up to 2 feet. We just got 2 new line items this month for the up to 4 feet flood cuts. So you can see some of the work that Verisk and Xactimate's pricing department is doing here. They added 2 new line items up to 4 feet, but they also looked at the existing line items in the price list, the up to 2 feet line items.
Yep.
And what they noted is that based on their surveys, their contractor surveys, there seems to be, you're getting less material with every roll, or I should say, you're getting less useful material out of every roll that you're using. Essentially, I can see you wanted to repackage it already. How would you say it?
Okay. What they're trying to account for here is when folks come through on the mitigation side and they're working in a Cat 3 environment, for example, and they're pulling out this insulation, a lot of times restorers don't take the time to cut the R13 paper-backed bat insulation. They'll just pull it out of the wall. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. The preferred methodology, to the extent that it isn't compromised, is to cut it along the bottom of the drywall. But you have to do that thoughtfully because you're dealing with mechanical systems and electrical systems and plumbing systems within the wall, so on. So sometimes folks don't want to take the time to do that. What do? They just pull it out of the wall. Well, in so doing, now the repair side of the house has their work cut out for them, and they have to shove that R13 up in the wall to account for what was otherwise removed. And so, if there's a fire block on an exterior wall and that's at 5 feet, then that's not a big deal. But if it's an interior wall, which a lot of the nice high-end builds will have insulation on the interior walls, boy, you could really be chasing that thing. So what's Xact doing? It's doing what it's historically done so well for 30 years, is saying, okay, like, where is it fair and reasonable? Where does this come out most of the time? So they're trying to accommodate the fact that some additional insulation and perhaps labor would be required to get that back up into the wall, which is why you see a difference in price between, like, say, the square footage line items for R13 bat insulation versus the ones that are done by linear foot.
Well said. Generally, they created 2 new line items. They looked at the existing line items and they made changes based on current building methodologies and making sure that things are in line with how things are being done in the field. Anytime Xact is looking at line items, making changes based on how things are being done in the field in 2021 is positive change in my book. All right. Lastly, you saw slight changes here for the sand and finish, the wood heat register. I shouldn't say small changes because they're actually quite large when it comes to changes in the labor. Went from 100. What is this? What is the unit here? Each you could do 100 sand and finish wooden heat registers in an hour. They've updated that to 31. That seems more realistic in my mind. Sanding and finishing 100 of those wood heat registers seems like an ungodly pace to maintain.
Yeah. 31 still seems
a lot.
Pretty intense.
1 every 2 minutes per hour.
I think it just depends on what that would mean to sand and refinish it. But anyhow, it's some thought went into that, right?
Yes.
The clean 100 tells you something was a little wacky, but the 31 is like, okay, they quantitatively, sought top-down feedback and came up with a numerical value. Okay. Additional item info changes. So this is the big aspect of what will hit like almost every repair claim. At least in some form.
Do you do painting on your losses? Do you do a lot of painting? Do you see contractors doing painting a lot? Do you out there do painting on your losses? Do you paint walls? Do you paint baseboard? Do you paint ever? Guess what? If you paint in a property, big changes just happened this month. So note that these are not yield changes. First off, this is the additional item information. And what we have seen historically is that when Xact is changing the additional item information, it means there was not clarity in a line item. Contractors and adjusters were having disagreements over the intention of a line item, what is or is not included. Painting is a great example of that because for years, I've had people on stage ask me, hey, Harrison, it says that an average amount of prep work is included in the painting line items. Prep work for detaching and resetting outlet covers, to be able to move furniture around, things like that.
Disconnecting light fixtures, right? We get that question constantly on Xact Ninjas when we're out training, so on.
The question being, what exactly is an average amount of prep work and how much of it is included in the line item?
Yeah.
Well, you'll see in this, by the way, affects all of the painting line items essentially of PNTP, P+, P2, PNTS, ceiling, faux painting, special painting. Let's take a look at the exact verbiage here. So I'm actually going to maximize December here. I want to look at the item image because I think this is the easiest way to find this. So if you are unfamiliar with what we're doing, I'm clicking the individual line item, going to item image. I'm going to select the image to get the additional item information. What I was referencing was this right here. Painters frequently remove switch and outlet covers, drop simple light fixtures, and move items away from walls to make it easier. An average amount of this kind of prep work is included. Great.
Like
not
full
clear
stop.
at all.
Yeah, well, like as an adjuster, you can use that and it knows no bounds because it's like, oh, that's already included in
It
the
says
line
it's included.
item.
An average amount.
Yeah, but that can be problematic if you're a restorer.
This is where we find clarity in the additional item information sections. This is what was added. Here's the exact verbiage that was added this month. In situations where detaching and resetting fixtures is warranted because of size, situation, and or a trade licensed contractor being needed for this activity, this assumption would not normally be included and may need to be accounted for separately. The manipulation of larger or excessive amounts of contents items may warrant additional or separate line items. It is up to the estimator and parties involved to determine if their scenario logically requires modification to the existing item and or if additional line items are needed. Stop there for a moment. What does this say? This is trying to clarify what kind of average amount of prep work is needed. If you've got giant cabinets in front of a wall that you need to like paint, just like slightly moving that is probably not going to be included in the line item because that's a giant cabinet. You
mean like a hutch, something?
Yeah. You have safety concessions, OSHA, maybe 50-pound minimum limit here. Like that's not what.
Maybe it's all full of contents and you can't move the hutch until you pack out the contents with the dishes that were in the hutch, right? So it definitely creates space for additional manipulation of contents or pack out maybe warranted, which makes sense. And I know how we got here because the pricing department has been surveying painters about like what price would you guys charge per square foot, so on. And that's like kind of the basis of this line item as it should be. But I know that when hiring a lot of painters, I used to own a painting company. If there was outsized contents, that became a significant portion of our invoice. But often we would just package it in. So it became difficult for the pricing department to get that feedback and integrate it into a line item. So now what they're just saying is they're given space. Like if there's outsized amounts of contents and its size or amount, right, it may be warranted bill for extra contents. Good, right? That makes sense. Check that box. They also note here that if the detach of that particular building feature, the example would be like a high-end light fixture chandelier, you may need an electrician to come and detach that. Well, that may need to be accounted for separately. When they're saying that the painter could just drop light fixtures, they're thinking of like the $8 light fixture, Harrison, that's like less than a pound and can just hang by the wire nuts and you can paint around it. But as you start to work with higher end fixtures, there's more risk, there's more weight. That's not going to fly in a private client scenario, etc. So you may need a licensed contractor or electrician to come in and drop that for you.
And use separate line items to contemplate the cost associated with that activity.
Yeah, you got it. So definitely check that box. I think this is really gives some space for contractors to include other line items, as warranted for painting. We can't just say, oh, I gave you one coat of paint that covers everything. I think that was abused a bit by the carrier side of the house. So this doesn't make it easy for you guys as contractors. The owner's still on you. You have to add the line item. You have to explain why. You may need to highlight this additional item information was updated. You've still got some work to do, but at least Xact gave you some space to perform said work.
I think you and I love it most when we can have the conversations.
That's what it's about.
That's the goal, is for a contractor and an adjuster to have conversations about a unique loss scenario and the unique scope of work on that loss to be able to determine what are the reasonable costs associated with getting this policyholder back to full strength. And so this just helps further the conversations. Less fighting, more education is generally good for the industry at large. All right. Big deal, painting line items this month. By the way, there are some additional painting changes. The seal and paint cabinetry faces only line items here. You've got full height, lower, upper, and vanity faces only. All of them had the same change. It's basically to clarify that the labor included in this line item is for all sides of the doors and the faces. So you can see that some contractors are out there were expressing their opinion that when you paint faces only, it's only for the front of the faces.
Come on, you guys.
And it doesn't include the sides of the faces. I mean, it's
my
okay.
Restore homies, you guys are ridiculous. I cannot believe that you were interpreting this to bill for what the
additional
front,
labor hours for just
sides.
the sides of the faces. Yes.
No, that wasn't the intention. Okay, yes. So it's all sides of the doors, faces only. All right. So now that's
faces
clear.
only, including all sides of the doors. Pretty simple there. This was the existing line items around power distribution box and generator temporary power cables. Please note now that these line items say below 100 amps here. So the existing line items are below 100, and we have new line items with the greater than sign that represent greater than 100 amp when you're entering power distribution boxes and temporary power cables and cable ramps. Additionally, the needle moved a little bit on the air movers. They have clarified that air movers, normal and mini air movers, the CFM measurement is 950. In November, I guess I should show briefly, it was 850. So whereas greater than 850 actual CFM for a normal air mover, less than 850 CFM for a mini. Now we have 950. So anything above 950 is a normal air mover. Anything below 950 is considered a mini air mover.
So a slight carrier-centric move there, but
Yeah.
I think it's really them just probably tracking the performance of the equipment in the marketplace, in that just all electrical motors are getting more efficient. Right? It's happening. Thanks, Tesla.
Yep. On its way. Some final, miscellaneous changes or really additional item information changes. This framing hanger line item now references hanger framing sizes. Specifically, if you want to know what I'm talking about, it says quality 2x6 or 2x8 joist hanger. That wasn't there previously. So just further clarifying, if you're using framing hangers, here's exactly the size of the framing hanger that we're referencing.
And there's a lot of hardware that I should mention that is in your list that you guys curate monthly of the commonly overlooked line items. There's a lot of hardware that is missed, hurricane clips, etc., from a day-to-day claim. You got to know that they exist, where to find them, and when it's warranted to work it into your scope. But,
and big changes. In fact, around the time this video comes out, we'll have big changes added, new line items being added to the commonly overlooked line item database. So if you have not checked out Actionable Insights on our website, getinsights.org, now's a really good time. Plus, it's the holiday season. There's usually deals and sales. So if you're trying to take advantage of what we do here at Actionable Insights with our resources and our perspective, feel free. This is the time. Come check us out. Comment below. Somebody will say hi. Hello. All right. So line items here. The last two changes. Whatley, we're talking stairways. We're talking curved stairways. We're talking up to 4 feet wide. We're talking super important. Okay. All they did was clarify the size of the hardwood risers. Apparently it used to say 4 by 4 inches.
Yeah.
Now it specifically says 1 inch by 8 inch hardwood risers. I don't think these curved staircase line items are being used in everyday claim settlement, so we won't spend all the world on them. But just know that changes did happen and they existed. All right.
That was anticlimactic. You sure you don't want to end on anything else? Like the line item that's used 3 times a year nationwide?
Yeah, no miscellaneous changes. Let's take a quick look. Is there anything coming up for next month? It looks like we potentially have in January line items for a full louvered double door. Could be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Does that get you a little bit more exciting for you?
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
All
maybe.
right. Whatley, this has been an incredible year of new line items. We've been doing a lot of work. This is the second year that we've done this video series. I mean, we've been doing priceless update summaries for 5 years now, putting out articles about all the new line items. So if you're wondering why we know all this stuff, it's because we've been literally looking at this every month for 5 years as to what line items come out and how they were intended to be used. I got to give a thanks to everybody out in Xactimate Ninjas, everyone that follows Actionable Insights, our subscribers, our monthly subscribers, anybody that's coming to join us for training. This has been very helpful of a series. We get a lot of feedback from people that are just getting to learn Xactimate for the first time, and even those that have been doing it for as long as I've been alive, of what they learned from this video series. It's always a good time of year at the end of the year to look back at, how did things go this year? I think there were a lot of new line items that came out that were really important. Whatley, maybe we'll do a little video series of our top new line items in 2021. That's a good
cool.
idea.
Yeah, off the cuff.
Thought of that one.
Okay.
But we'll see what we can
Comment
do
below if you'd like to see that. Or maybe we'll put that together. I don't know. I'm just looking at this in a spirit of gratitude, man. It's a lot of work for the pricing department to adopt a single line item. And they adopted 19 in December. Big line items that are going to take a lot of work for them to continue to curate for basically perpetuity. So I encourage you guys as restorers and carriers, because you guys both ask for new line items constantly. That's what they're responding to. Every time they add a new line item, that means they got to track that in 470 markets and continue to track the labor and material changes and even tax changes around that forever. So this is why, they don't adopt 150 or 200 a month. They have to commit now for perpetuity to like track, these line items and report on the pricing associated with it. But I think it's wonderful that the pricing department is responding in these ways. You see it with the tile removal to really accommodate the shift towards the managed repair networks, having now even more than 50% of the claim volume. And because of those agreements between the contractors and the managed repair networks and the carrier partners, often restorers are absolutely constrained to certain line items, and I think the pricing department is creating space for the restorer and even the TPA executive to like approve a scope now that there is a line item for it, because they can't. When you're in a program environment, you can't just default back to WTR LAB. Oh, I put in extra labor for that shower surround removal. That's a nightmare for everybody. And so now they smooth the way for, swifter and noble claim settlement, which I think is excellent and for which I'm grateful.
As am I. It's December. We just passed Thanksgiving. Hopefully you all have many things to give thanks about this year. Please enjoy your holiday seasons, whatever holidays you celebrate. Put a smile on, enjoy the holiday season. Stay warm for those of you that are in cold. Stay cold for those of you that are in warm places. And we'll see you next year when it's 2022 and we're looking at the January additions to the price list. In the meantime, good luck settling all those claims out there.
Keep building.